red button before I forget to do it. That has happened before. And I shall go into my more spiel. Howdy, folks. Damo here. Welcome to the Activist Show on Socialist Telly, and this week has a very local flavour. I'm sure many of you have heard of, if not attended, the World Transformed Political Festival held each September since 2016. But here in 2022, Cornwall is getting its own version, as the inaugural Kernow Transformed Festival will be held this coming June. To discuss this with me and other issues pertaining to Cornwall on the whole is the organiser of this magnificent event, trade unionist, campaigner and now treasurer of Cornwall Trades Council, John Whitcher, and my old mate, Jen Forbes as well, former parliamentary candidate for Truro and Falmouth, who is also involved in this festival. John, Jen, good to see you both again. How are you both?
Yeah, good, mate. Right on. How you doing?
Fabulous, fabulous, as always. Always. Love it. So, Kernow Transform. This is exciting stuff. Stuff like this doesn't normally happen in Cornwall. Let's get straight into it. What inspired you to organise this event, John?
I guess really, I'd been to a few sort of political festivals when I was living up country a few years ago, and I saw that they had an amazing effect of, you know, that sort of thing of like some of the most useful conversations happen in the pub after work and that kind of thing. And I was just thinking, like, just be able to create this sort of overlay space of where there's a lot of sort of disparate groups of activists down in Cornwall. Some of them don't even know each other because we're so spread out. Some of them might have like sort of ideological differences, minute ones, which can sometimes lead to sort of very heated discussions. And I think there's something like in creating this sort of extra space where we can sort of come together and, you know, listen to a program, listen to some bands, but also just, I think some of the most important stuff that happened there is just the informal conversations and creating this space to sort of network and befriend people, really. And that was the inspiration behind it.
Jen, what do you make of this coming to Cornwall? You've attended the World Transform Festival in the past, haven't you? What do you make of Cornwall having its own one?
I think it's absolutely fantastic. Massive hats off to John for actually getting off his arse and organising something like this. It's a phenomenal amount of work and it's so good for us in Cornwall. But yeah, I went to the World Transformed and it was a really amazing thing. Obviously that coincided with Corbyn, the Corbyn movement in the Labour Party. But it wasn't just about Corbyn. It was a kind of critical analysis of everything going on the left. And it was really amazing to have that space running alongside Labour conference, where loads of people actually just came for that. They didn't even go for Labour conference a lot of the time and got to discuss some really interesting and really interesting things, have a lot of fun, you know, and like bond with each other. So for all those reasons John just said, I think it's amazing for us to have this opportunity in Cornwall, and particularly because there's such a big cohort of people just from that Corbyn movement that they would have been like the biggest in Cornwall, easily the biggest amount of people. So they joined Labour to support something like the kind of values that this festival is like talking about and sort of sharing, and have since left Labour. And they're probably a bigger group of people that have existed in any other political party, even now, like in Cornwall right now. That's a big group of people that are politically aware, you know, enthusiastic about creating change in the world, and haven't got a space to talk and discuss and come together with other new like-minded people. So I just think it's an amazing opportunity for us in Cornwall to grow our movement into whatever it wants to be without sort of being prescriptive as well.
Yeah,
Definitely.
do you want to add to that, John, at all?
No, I mean, I think that's said it far more eloquently and articulately than
She's had practice, to be fair.
I know, isn't it? It's like all these people with experienced public speaking. I think that's it. And the big thing is it's not to be sort of prescribing what we want people to do. It's just to create the space for these discussions to happen. And
I think it's a great thing to actually do in order to open this up and actually have conversations again, because I think for so many people for so long, especially since Corbyn stepped down, what Labour has kind of become, where do socialists kind of go at this point in time, and for them to actually come together and start to have conversations again and maybe find some kind of a direction, find some common ground, find some things to campaign on, find some groups that they can actually join or listen to, perhaps ones that they've never heard of before, meet people they have never spoken to before, find that common ground again and find some direction in which to go forwards and take socialism forwards in Cornwall. I mean, Cornwall, for a lot of people who are going to be watching this from around the country, is not exactly a place known for its socialism, perhaps, because it's been a Tory blue county for some years now. How would you describe the socialist movement in Cornwall?
Eclectic, I would say, is the best way of describing it. There's a lot of good people. I think part of like the geography here doesn't add to our advantage, that we've got a lot of small towns very spread out. So from organising this, one of the things that I found out was that I introduced a lot of people who'd never heard of each other, and I was surprised at how many people who'd been active politically in Cornwall for like a number of years haven't met people who are like 2 towns over because of the way we're dispersed. I also think, I think there's that sort of energy that's kind of, like Jen said, has sort of disappeared from the sort of Corbyn movement, and I think it's important that we don't waste it because it's still there. It's a little bit directionless at the moment. And what I notice with a lot of discourse on the left is it's very sort of London-centric or national-centric, and areas, like you say, that have been blue seats for a while, there isn't much conversation and sort of strategic awareness developed because we're all kind of distracted about the sort of national story. So just being able to create this space where we, build our own narrative on like, what is the local story? What is happening down here? Because a lot of the time there's loads of great stuff happening. There's like trade unions are starting to build up more presence. There's Acorn going on down here. There's people doing a number of things like the Kill the Bill movement was quite big. The G7 coalition. There's all of these groups, but they're not quite sort of communicating it. And I think that's partly a geographic reason, but also partly because there's a sort of distraction from national politics where we don't always get the opportunity to take stock and look at what's happening locally.
They fair points that he's making there, Jen. What do you make of socialism then and now, shall we say?
Well, I mean, if we start from then, what happened in Cornwall with the rise in membership for the Labour Party? We had some of the biggest rises in the country, and that correlated with the swing in votes, the biggest swings as well. So it's like directly related to this basically like latent force of people that were really interested in something different. And I think that a lot of people could identify that with that straight away being in Cornwall. We feel so cut off and different to the rest of the country that something different that was offering real alternatives to the challenges that we faced that are so extreme and in often cases really unique to Cornwall, it felt like there were a lot of answers for us and potential answers for us in that movement. So now I feel like there's still an awful lot of that feeling, but perhaps as well because it's so painful for us to have had so many people so enthusiastic. Like for my campaign, it was so much more local people powered than they had in other places where you've got urban centres where everyone could come in. It was like we relied on people in villages getting out and doing stuff, and hundreds of them to do that. So it's like a lot of people that put so much energy in to doing stuff that haven't had a direction, and that lack of a focus can really turn into sort of like, some nasty negative emotions, can it? And it's so important to have a way to come together and to sort of get over that. And like John said, I think it's really fascinating, even for me. John's introduced me to people that I don't know in Cornwall that I would share views with. And I think the fact that he's come in and done this in a really non-factional kind of way is such an exciting opportunity for Cornwall. Everyone should just get behind. We all need to just get there, forget any of the old stuff now actually, and just think, what do we want to create for Cornwall now? How can we form a movement now that's about understanding the situation that we're in and where we can put pressure on to create changes? Because we've got a lot of people power. We just need to work out ways to do that together. And starting off from like open discussions and just being really free and open and unfactional about that, it's got to be the best way for us to start, hasn't it? Well,
we've seen the damage that factionalism has reaped with the Labour Party especially, and you're right. I mean, so many people did come into the movement through around Corbyn, shall we say, as a figurehead, as a rallying point. And I'm no different. I'm exactly the same. I was never in a political party before. I ended up joining the Labour Party, first time I'd ever joined a political party ever in my life. And I ended up, for several years, a disability officer in the CLP. I ended up a branch chair in that CLP. I campaigned like mad in 2019. The result there was an absolute kick to the gut, and we all felt it. And since he went, of course, you're absolutely right. He has, he's gone, and that rallying point has gone again. But for Cornwall, like you say, Jen and John, this festival could well be a rallying point. it will introduce people to people they haven't met before, as you yourself have done, and surely we would have thought you'd have met everyone by now. But just the beauty of Cornwall, everybody knows everybody, but they don't. Actually, it doesn't. And actually, the pandemic, I think, has helped a great deal with the advent of things like Zoom, which we're using so much now, is actually connecting towns a little bit more. So I know that the World Transformed, it kind of, throughout the year, it continues its political education. And of course, this was a fantastic part of Labour under Corbyn. We had that political education. We had these people specifically going around to train people in all manner of campaigning and door knocking and speaking and so on and so forth. Is there any plans for Kernow Transform to take that sort of year-round approach, John? Maybe I'm talking a little bit too early days here, but that political education, that continuation of what the festival hopefully will start, and will Zoom and other digital platforms help to actually bring Cornwall together?
Yeah, I definitely hope so. I think it's a discussion sort of after the festival, when I've stopped reading risk assessments and post-it notes and everything. That's pretty much my life at the moment. I've had a 2-hour conversation about toilet rolls the other day. So that's so if I'm inarticulate, I'll apologise now. That's where my brain is. But yeah, I think you summed up a lot of stuff really well, and I think it's important not to be too pessimistic. I was chatting to one of the people who's coming down to speak, Keir Milburn. He said, possibly in hindsight, it was a bit ambitious that sort of socialists would take the government in a sort of 5-year cycle, from where we were so disempowered before 2015 that we even got a candidate close to number 10 is an impressive thing. And I think there's still a lot of infrastructure and networks that are still there after that. So it's not like we're back in 2015 again. Although we had that horrible defeat in 2019, we are actually in a lot stronger position than we were 10 years ago. And I think, accept the failures and take stock from it, but also, don't get too beaten up. There's a lot of stuff in infrastructure and political education, a whole load of stuff that came out of that movement, which is going to be far more useful if we get a shot again. We're going to be a lot stronger on the ground than we were in 2015, 2017, 2019. So there's still good stuff, there's, every cloud has a silver lining, or whatever you say,
Jen, do you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I'm really hoping that we're going to take out of this, because this is my hobby horse, is trade unionism. So some of the things we're going to be talking about there, that it might be really new to a lot of people in Cornwall, especially young people working in hospitality and things like that have not really seen a trade union presence, or they've not been a member of a trade union before. And we're going to have some talks about that. And that's one really solid, concrete way that we can get more people in an organised movement and increase political education, through the year. So I'm hoping that we're going to be running some trade union courses specifically aimed at young people in Cornwall after this, to continue that. And then hopefully that will grow into its own movement as well. So we can actually start to create some real changes off the back of it. And that's just one idea that I have. And I'm really confident that there are going to be a lot of people going to this event that have got so many amazing ideas that are going to be coming up with other things that we can do as well, which is really what's quite exciting about it, I think.
Yeah. John, obviously, I'm aware that you're heavily involved in Acorn and also Unite Community. This is how we came to know each other, actually. We're both Unite Community members. And obviously, you're on the Cornwall Trades Council as well. And a lot of people, including myself, before you happened to mention it to me, weren't even aware Cornwall even had its own Trades Council anymore. There's not all that many of them around the country. They seem to be few and far between. What sort of trade union aspects are going to be brought to the festival from your knowledge of trade unionism, and obviously Jennifer's?
Oh yeah, hopefully loads. I want to put a big trade union sticker over as much of it as possible. We've got Amelia Horgan coming down, who wrote Lost in Work, and she's going to be on a panel with both Jen and a few other local and sort of national trade unions. I want to have a discussion about how sort of trade union activity could work in climate activism. That's another big thing that I think is something we should really address. Is the sort of, someone said to me a few weeks ago that XR managed to shut down the Murdoch press for a day. The trade unions could probably shut it down for a month if they got organised. So there's there's a lot of stuff like that I want to think about. And then, yeah, everything from like how to organize your workplace, a big thing on hospitality, I think, down here. We've started to get a few people join the Bakers Union in Cornwall. So just a little plug for like those are in the Bakers Union. And if you are in hospitality down here, join them, because every worker should have a union. And this is where most of the young workforce in Cornwall seem to be. They're in precarious hospitality work. And I think it's really important that we encourage as many of them as possible. So, you know, one, explain why a union is useful to them, and two, getting them to join and getting them to organise. So there's a big emphasis on hospitality organising. We've also got a group called Red Plenty Games coming down, who do these kind of sort of strategy games, sort of a bit like Dungeons and Dragons, but for trade unionism. So there's make it fun as well, isn't it? So yeah, we've got loads of
things I never thought were ever being brought together. But go on.
Oh mate, yeah, no, trade union Dungeons and Dragons is the way forward, man. It's all about like how to like organize your workplace. You get to roll the dice, see if it works. You know, do one-on-ones and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, like a big emphasis on that. But then yeah, we'll be talking about like a lot of other stuff of just generally where the left is at the moment, and also sort of big picture discussion of where do we want it to go. And I don't think it's something we can sort of top down sort of push on people, but really sort of cultivate these discussions from the bottom up and sort of come up with a sort of, you know, a general distributed consciousness, I guess.
Yeah. Jen, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just want to come back quickly on that environmental point, because that's another thing that really excites me. So as a young trade unionist, I got involved with climate work through my union and actually made some real concrete changes. And it was one of the big things that made me realise the massive power that trade unions have. And I think there's a bit of a perception that trade unions, you know, they've been involved in like dragging their heels on climate change. But for people in Cornwall, then it's a way that we can sort of show people, because there's a massive cohort of people that really care about the environment in Cornwall. I think maybe even like a bigger proportion of people than elsewhere, and get involved in lots of really valuable campaigning. But this is a way we can target some of that energy into really like solid asks that can create change by demanding things from employers. So, you know, bringing those sorts of people together to share and discuss, and then sort of channel some of those energies together in like really solid ways, could actually produce some really exciting stuff. So, you know, there's lots of opportunities for crossover as well, from like sharing these ideas and working out how we're going to move forward together. So I can't wait. I think it's going to be brilliant.
That is the beauty of bringing so many people together in one place. These conversations can happen and people can bounce ideas off of each other and come to different conclusions, different ways of campaigning, different ways of pushing a topic. And the environment obviously is an absolutely huge one, especially here in Cornwall. I know when people think of the environment in Cornwall, it tends to be the first thing you tend to think of tends to be our waterways, our beaches. I know there's a huge campaign at the minute about water supplies and hail, which is a massive issue. Pollution of the Red River up in Red Roof, areas like that. And this is an opportunity to come together and have conversations about how we deal with that and how we can do our bit in Cornwall to impact beyond that, I guess, as well. So it'll be really exciting to have conversations, really exciting to see some of these panels. And of course, this is the one thing that the World Transformed is famous for. It is its speakers, its guests, its panels. And you've got so many people who are coming down to be involved in this, John. You have done an absolutely stellar job in bringing so many people down to the far west of Cornwall, which is where it's being held. How is the festival going to be structured, and who is coming?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to put like a little plug out. Sorry, this is really unsocialist, but Rubicon Books in Falmouth, because it was Lee who'd had the contacts who basically managed to get me in contact with a lot of these panelists. So I probably wouldn't have been able to do that without him. So I'd just like to thank him there. It's a really good radical left bookshop. If you're interested in books on socialism, anarchism, all that kind of stuff. Sorry, no, I'll stop doing that. I suddenly felt really American, like I was doing like a big advertising.
At least you didn't wish him a happy birthday. I would have had to draw the line.
Yeah, that would have been better. But no, like he was a massive help. So I can't take, I've got to give credit where credit's due.
Absolutely.
We've got Joe Glennon. So he was pretty famous, outspoken sort of left-wing veteran. We've got Keir Milburn and Jeremy Gilbert, who've been involved with like Novara Media and like many things like that. We've got Ron Ware, who's a sort of very seasoned activist. Climate. We've got James Medway, former advisor to John McDonald. We've got locally, we've got Joni Willett, co-director of the Institute of Cornish Studies. So, make sure we're not, forgetting local people as well.
Well, it's Kernow Transform. We've got to have some local.
Yeah, we're going to have, that's something that I'm excited about, is we're going to be talking about autonomy in Cornwall seriously. So everything from, whether we're looking at devolution or independence, or looking at more the sort of low-level municipal socialism, sort of flat-pack democracy sides. Ollie DeRose, who's written Suburban Socialism, he's coming down. He's going to be talking about that. That's just off the top of my head. There's loads more panelists. I've got a clipboard with all of them on it somewhere, and I'm just sorry if I didn't mention you. My brain is again fuzzy.
Well, you can say apology accepted, Jen, because he didn't mention you.
No, we're talking big names here and exciting people. Also, I'm going to have to chip now, but it's been really great to come on and just have a quick chat with you. But he's got loads of fun stuff lined up as well. So you need to list that off, because I think you shouldn't underestimate how amazing that's been for all of us now to finally feel like we're getting out and about and meeting each other again, and to just get together and have a bit of a laugh with people in person as well. I think it's going to be really nice.
These things are family events. You can bring your partners, bring your kids. There is something for everyone there. It's not just panels with themes and talking politics and talking campaigns. There is a lot more to these festivals. It is a proper festival, music and stuff like that too. So it's absolutely wonderful. It is going to be a great couple of days. Jennifer, I know you've got a dash, so I'm going to say my goodbyes to you, and bless your heart. Thank you for coming on tonight.
No worries. Cheers, guys. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Right, just the lads now.
Right on.
So, yes, plenty of music, plenty of activity for all the family, and it's going to be a wonderful time. Let's park the World Transform, though, for a moment, because I know you wanted to discuss a few issues that are pertaining to Cornwall as well as a whole politically, and Cornwall at the moment is on the forefront perhaps of a few of these political issues. I suppose the most recent one that's come out has been sort of Brexit essentially, and the news of late that Cornwall's not going to get the 300 million it was promised to make up for the EU funding we would lose if we voted for Brexit, and Cornwall as a whole under first past the post, I won't say by majority, but as a whole voted to voted for Brexit, because frankly we all know that first past the post, it doesn't count anybody that didn't actually vote. So them saying there was a majority that voted for it, let's not go there. But ultimately Cornwall voted for Brexit, and we've been screwed, haven't we? Because we're only going to get about 132 million of the 300 promised. It's not great, is it?
No, I mean, I don't think anyone who saw those promises on the buses or anything expected that. It's sad, but it's fairly predictable. I think that and yeah, it's not really in a good situation because of everything else that's happening with cost of living and that. It's gonna get hard. These next sort of 5 years are gonna really sort of put the pressure on people there, and it is. People like ourselves sort of working families, stay-at-home dads. I know just getting the heat and staying on, putting petrol in the car. This is all just getting less and less feasible. There's already a big problem with housing crisis down here, with people getting sort of evicted because of houses being turned into Airbnbs. So yeah, I mean I don't know too much on the sort of nitty-gritty mechanics of it, but I know it's not going to be an easy time for the next few years, which I think is why it's really important that we do build this sense of community, and sort of this kind of thing that we had under the Corbyn moment, where people went door knocking with people who are complete strangers. We need to keep these relationships going, because next few years, that's all we've got really is each other. And I think, building these networks and these communities that's our best defense against this. Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned a couple of things there. I mean, the cost of living crisis, frankly. I mean, Cornwall is one of the poorest areas of the country already. The EU funding really did make a difference down here. To lose it is frankly catastrophic. But the housing crisis just seems to get worse and worse. You're heavily involved with the Acorn. What is the shape of things at the moment with regards to housing?
Not great. There's still a shortage of shortage of rentals for this. So basically, anyone who is renting, you're basically living in a constant state of anxiety, because every time, like, the landlord rings, it can be something about really like mundane, that they come in and fix something. There's that sort of gut feeling of like, are they serving me a Section 21? Have they decided to sell up? Am I going to be homeless? Am I going to have to like replan like my entire life? And I think there's a lot of people who are in that situation. And then there are a lot of people who are worse. With Acorn, we've been getting inundated with requests for assistance from eviction resistance. Problem is that the way it works is we're very hyper local, because it's people who are on low income, who are kind of poor themselves. So we can't drive around all over Cornwall. We've been getting requests up in Bude, Penzance, and we're like a Falmouth branch. So it's basically, the idea is it's where we go where we can feasibly walk or get the bus to. So there is like, it'd be nice if it spreads further across Cornwall, because I have seen it work. When I lived in Brighton, I've seen evictions successfully resisted. I've seen deposits returned. I've seen dodgy landlords and letting agents stood up to and win, because there is that sort of collective power that when we do come together. But yeah, it's there's a lot of dodgy stuff going on at the moment, especially with like, there's some murky stuff going on with the council. That we've all seen the stories about the homeless pods. Those things being set up in Camborne and Truro, and it just doesn't seem to be fair, really, does it? When there's like so many houses that are perfectly good that are being empty because someone wants to spend a week, a year in there, and
Yes.
we're being told, well, that's just the way it is because they've got more money, and
it's not good enough, really. As you say, there's a housing crisis, but unfortunately, there's a Conservative-controlled local county council now, so there's no real, well, what's the word for it, direction or imminent chance of things being improved anytime soon, because they won't step in. They won't stop the holiday lets, because capitalism is everything. If somebody's making money out of that, then you can't live there then, because somebody's making money and paying taxes and growing the economy and all that sort of business. But so much money actually goes out of the county because of holiday lets. I mean, the furlough money, for example, that was given out to holiday letting people who have holiday homes. They claim a holiday lets. Whether they were let or not, they were able to access a fund of, I can't remember how much it was, about £270 million or something like that. And a hefty chunk of it went straight out of the county, straight out of our economy.
Yeah.
Because the people who own those homes don't live down here.
There's like an interesting phenomenon in economics called the Dutch disease. And it always sounds like some sort of like weird rash growing here.
Isn't it? But yeah.
It's to do with like, it was started in like Holland when they discovered offshore oil. It basically reduced the competitiveness of all their domestic manufacturing because of what it did to the dollar. But it tends to get used for a term of when you concentrate an economy around one industry to the detriment of others. And it's easy enough to think about this in the summer, where just go on the roads where we've got that much tourism down here. Now, if you think you're sort of a builder or someone who's got to do like a plumber, who's got to do multiple stops driving around a day, when those roads clog up, that's someone who's going to be able to like get to less jobs and trade less. And there's all kinds of things, the issue with like at Trellis Hospital with like NHS workers, I think some of them are staying in vans, and they've got a shortage of workers because there's no one can afford to live down here. So it affects housing. It affects a number of sectors because you've got like sort of seasonal precarious work, which means long-term work becomes less sustainable. It increases commutes, and commute time means sort of less economic activity, less other like industries trading with each other. So I think, we've got tourism down here, but we're a small peninsula, and we need it to be sustainable and in numbers where it doesn't affect residents. I like that saying, sort of refugees welcome tourists, maybe question mark, some, but just we've got to be honest with ourselves. We're not that much bigger. If you put like Jersey and Guernsey and the Isle of Man together, that's probably what you've got with like Cornwall in size, really, isn't it? Maybe a little bit bigger.
It's. I know one argument that I've often heard said is that when you think about, well, Cornwall hasn't got any industry; it's only got tourism, only got seasonal work and hospitality. It couldn't possibly run itself. I mean, as people even say it about Scotland. Scotland's far larger than Cornwall, but Cornwall's about the same size as Lebanon. Yeah. So it is possible, I suppose.
There's loads of countries with a population of 500,000 that do.
Yeah.
But there's like certain studies that said in developed countries, the smaller, the higher of the standard of living you tend to have. So places like Luxembourg, Iceland, Malta, they tend to do pretty well without being attached to one of these mega blocks. And I think, there's definitely is stuff going on down here. So I don't think we need to be that kind of sort of fully dependent. And I think everyone can agree that some greater degree of autonomy, whether it's sort of devolution or maybe it's municipal socialism, where we just look at let's get the districts back, let's get into our sort of town and parish councils and give power to the local town councils down here. Because we with Acorn, we went along, did an action at Falmouth Town Council, and it was a pretty easy action because they all agreed with us. And then they said, problem is that the buck keeps getting passed to so it gets sent to Liz Kernow, in the Truro, and then it gets sent up country. And if we've just got some of that decision making and housing and planning permission down here, we'd be able to actually make it manageable.
Yeah. One of the things that occurs to me though is, as much as we're talking about this money that if I come back to that point where the money that was promised to Cornwall and hasn't actually been delivered, of course all the Cornish MPs, all the who are all Tories, all of the Tories on Cornwall Council, they're all saying, well, this is a great deal for Cornwall though. Well, it's not, because we've been screwed, and of course we have a housing crisis, and we've got a horrendous track record of always voting Conservative, and there's Conservatives on local councils. They seem to be everywhere. And one of the things that people from around the other country, particularly areas that may be more Labour voting, they'll look at Cornwall and says, well, you need to stop voting Tory then. Why do you think people do vote Tory so much down in Cornwall?
It's a good question, isn't it? I mean, I think there's a few, there's like a generational thing. If you look at the breakdown of how people voted, we've got an older retired population. So there tends to be this sort of generation that did all right out of Thatcher relatively, in terms of that they could buy their own home. They're at a point where I think in the 70s, was it? It was mortgages were in negative equity. So if you had cash, part of your mortgage was effectively getting paid off by the bank, which wasn't the case in the 80s or 90s. So there's a certain financial means of comfort to a certain generational cohort, and then they've been also, because they're a bigger generation than sort of the young, the Gen Xers, millennials as well. They have been a bigger voting force. So that's where one of the issues is, we are kind of dwarfed electorally. I'm convinced that some of the solutions is, we need to go back to sort of basics of sort of trade unionism and ground level tactics. We've got to look at sort of taking organised labour seriously before we can build our project in terms of electorally. I think that there's that, and then there's the issue of just usual media misinformation. We all know the BBC's got a pretty conservative slant, and there are a lot of people who trust it as an independent sort of non-biased news source, and it's hang on a minute, most of the senior directors, there's a revolving door between the BBC and the Conservative Party, and then there's just a lot of people who are staying at home watching BBC all day, and all of that sort of crap. And it's I think really, as bleak as it all seems at the moment, we've got to have a little bit of sort of faith that we've got the better program, and if we keep at it, just knuckle down and keep sort of doing very sort of ground level community tactics. I mean, there's one thing that I think you can sometimes say about people is a lot of people will think they're a Tory or think they're a socialist, and they haven't really, it's like they're voting for a football team or something. And when you talk to the person across the street, and they could be a Tory or a Labour, the pub that I across the road from me. I go into the bar there. There's someone who's a Marxist-Leninist who studied Marxist-Leninism in Russia. And then there's a local Tory town councillor. And they seem to sit at the bar together every night, having a pint, and they manage to get on. So, that's and I think that's as big a polar opposites as you can get in like politics. Obviously don't tolerate fascists, sod them. But I think when there's a lamppost broken across the street, regardless of ideological lines, you can both agree that the lamppost needs fixing. And I think that's why it's interesting what's coming up like north of the Preston model and that municipal socialism is when we cut through all of the sort of bull that's being pushed in the press and we just look at it as like basic level material stuff. I'm like, hang on, do you want this, this, and this? Here's what you need. People see very quickly who's on their side and who isn't. And these politicians can get called out, but the more we like align ourselves to the sort of the big national narrative, the more confused we're all going to be. And it is confusing. And deliberately so, I think.
Yeah. I mean, interesting you bring up the BBC there. I mean, it might be news to some people that the BBC chair is a Tory donor. Well, the BBC Director General was a former council candidate for the Conservatives. It's, as you say, it's a revolving door. I mean, the head of news at one point in the past was, I forget his name, but he was George Osborne's best man when he got married. I mean, it's madness. And that does affect the independency. It does affect impartiality because it's gone. I think a lot more people are waking up to this, but as you say, an awful lot of people still rely on the BBC for...
What was that woman who was crying, who got did the whole thing about laughing about the parties, and then a week later she did the teary apology? She was at the conference. I forgot her name.
Allegra Stratton.
But that's it, Allegra Stratton. So I saw a clip of her working as a BBC journalist about 2 years before, and she was trying to set up some sort of single mum on benefits who was working, and it was a real sort of horrible, cruel way of basically saying it was her fault for being poor, and that was someone who's working in the BBC sort of main news channel, and these are the people who are littered across that sort of profession. And there's this sort of semi lip service to certain progressive values of okay, we're not going to say anything outwardly racist and we're not homophobic, so therefore we're progressive. And it's not really. I mean, I think their attitudes to the working class is incredibly regressive and very sort of shaming. It's all of the usual narrative, mate. It's make us feel crap about ourselves, make us feel undeserving, and then we'll do the work for them. Tell us that we don't deserve this. Tell us that we aren't working hard enough. Tell us that we are lazy. And it's sorry, I'm close to swearing here. I'm trying to but it's just a load of bull, mate. I know people who are working multiple jobs, barely paying them the rent, and it's not through a lack of intelligence or a lack of hustle why they're like that. It's through a lack of opportunity. It is, and we need to stop blaming people who are struggling for struggling, because there's no correlation, mate. It's hard work can get you so far, but you're not going to get anywhere without luck, mate.
No, not these days. And we'll finish on bashing the BBC a bit, but I just wanted to make the point that actually you raised Allegra Stratton, I'll raise Andrew Marr and his infamous interview with Noam Chomsky, where Chomsky basically said, and I believe you believe exactly what you believe. I believe you're completely sincere in that, but if you believed anything else, you wouldn't be working here. And I think that sums up an awful lot of those journalists. And especially, anybody that wants to enter the journalistic profession, that many of these top journalists, these big beasts or whatever they call themselves.
Mate, they're all dressed like
they all come from a certain privileged background themselves, because fundamentally when they enter the profession they have to work for nothing as gophers for whoever, and it's only people whose families can support them to work for nothing for however long that can ever enter into this. And of course that's never going to be your average working class family, your average kid from Penryn or Bodmin or wherever. Or anywhere else in the country. It's
the same polyester suits, it's the same hairspray, mate. They all look like they're letting agents to me when I see them on TV. That's it. It's I always get that when I go.
That's good. Yeah, I like that.
It just looks like BBC journalists. They're sort of interchangeable. I reckon that's probably where they recruit half of them. To be fair.
Been down to Mathers for a new presenter.
Yeah, just going.
Yeah.
You do you hate poor people? Yes, right. You're hired.
That's it.
You're on,
Question
you're on
one.
board. Give that guy a show.
That's it. But I suppose one aspect of the people that how the Tories get into power so much is that we have this horrible electoral system that allows them to constantly get in. This is why we have this business of safe seats around the country where the same party is held on to X whatever seat for donkey's years, and it never ever changes hands, and it's a little wonder why people feel there's no point in voting, and it's first past the post. So it's no surprise whatsoever that the Conservatives are champing at the bit down here to elect a mayor under first past the post, perhaps, is it? What do you make of a mayor for Cornwall?
Well, I mean, first off, a little basic thing, like, just be nice to like the sort of Cornish, autonomous nationalists. Don't call it a mayor, first thing, call it someone in Cornish, and you've already, but that's just a like aesthetic point. I mean, I think Metro mayors seem to be a little bit of Blairite nonsense. They don't really like work particularly well. The idea of like
a spivvy title, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like people who've like spent too long watching The West Wing, and they like to sort of replicate that kind of politics. It's like, I'm not an expert on the ins and outs, so that's like the worst thing to say on a politics podcast. But it does seem like it's an opportunity to add another layer of bureaucracy where they're going to be on a very high salary. I understand combined authority mayors, they run like the deposit is like around $5,000. So that straight away pushes any sort of independence or like real genuine working class candidates out. This is like, it's going to be the usual sort of old money. If they're saying they're running it first past the post, which if it's for one individual, why are we doing a first past the post election? That's clearly like a stitch up. So I imagine that's going to be done by whoever wins the most electors in the existing ward council seats, but not done on like just who's got the most votes. So that's already, is that how it's going to work? Someone's going to explain.
Yeah, it's the trouble with first past the post is it is playing around with things like that. It is changing the rules and saying, we're going to count it in this certain way or that certain way, and we're going to group people together in this sort of. Why do you just not do it by a simple majority? It is, as you say, one person. If you're going to complicate it to elect one person to one role, then you're playing at something, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of first past the post. I mean, I know some socialists prefer it. Some socialists are on proportional alternate vote. I'm on the alternate vote proportional representation. I'd rather, as even if we didn't have power, have a larger bloc in Parliament, like you see in Europe.
Also, everyone's vote should count for something.
Yeah, no, I'm
like first past the post on that basis.
I believe in democracy at the end of the day, even if that doesn't get me like the perfect result that I want. I still think that's a better system. But I think doing it like there's some possible legitimacy of saying it like, okay, well, you're electing your ward councillor, so it's the person to represent you, and that's why you do like this sort of first past the post around these sort of constituencies and regionalism. But there's no point in it for like a single person. It should just be on a simple majority. If you're electing one person, and again, that just seems to be another thing that's a little bit of a bug in our way of understanding leadership. Is I think too much of us have developed our conceptualization of leadership around very primal things that are attitudes from the last century that aren't really going to serve us very well. And this idea that we need, one belligerent, shouty, confident person to be in charge of everything, rather than, something that's maybe a little bit more, consensus based. I think that was one of the problems, honestly, with Corbyn, was he was kind of the leader that we wanted, but we weren't ready for. The way he used to face the crowds, and he was very much a turnaround and led by consensus. He was a very compromising person. When a lot of people said he should have just, pushed the right of the party out, he took them on good faith and was willing to work with them. And in a sort of, maybe post-capitalist, more socialist society, that's what we want. And what you see in mainland Europe, where you've got a little bit more of a certain degree of professionalism, but there's something very dysfunctional about US and British politics, where we do kind of promote shouty men who are confident rather than competent. And that's something like about our system. It's like I think we've convinced ourselves in some way that that's what a leader should look like. And when we have someone who doesn't behave with this sort of belligerent confidence, we get a little bit concerned, being like, oh, maybe they're not a leader. And I think that's something we like.
I think that's certainly something people are learning with Boris Johnson, the way he's doing it. How isn't it? Because he is that belligerent, shouty,
very confident
type. But what does he stand for? What is he materially? And when the overriding word in the polls these days is liar, perhaps people need to think about not perhaps voting for a shouty person. Although, having said that, Keir Starmer's not particularly shouty either. I'm not too keen on supporting him either. But
yeah, I mean,
an entirely different kettle of fish.
There's a Kleenex pun or something in there, like with Keir Starmer. I'm sure about it. Not a big fan. Yeah. But again, it is still it's that sort of, about that sort of very like someone who's willing to pretend to say that they've got all the answers, rather than there's something that you very rarely see politicians turn around and be honest with you and go, at this moment in time, I don't know, which should be something that we should applaud people for saying, rather than being like, I'm going to. Of course,
the media would absolutely pillory them for it.
Yeah,
if they ever said it.
No,
what you end up doing is people talking a lot of nonsense and promising you the earth, and then not delivering on any of it.
Yeah, because they don't know what they're talking about.
Time after time.
I'd rather someone say, like, genuinely go, actually, I don't know much about that. I'll get back to you. I'd rather that than someone just waffle on and say something that they've made up, or try and do some sort of like mental gymnastics where they haven't actually explained anything, but they've just done like some sort of like little bit of sort of like salesy hypnosis to convince you that they've said something. And you walk away going, hang on, they didn't actually answer my question. And there's a lot of that in politics, and that's what we're pushing. And I think we need to, like, as humans, have a little bit of an inward look about who we think really want leading us.
There's honesty in not knowing something. Unfortunately, people who say they have the answers to these things. So it's a little bit of a catch-22, I guess, on the end of it. We're coming up on the end of our time, so I just wanted to come back to the Kernow Transform. Come on, sort yourself out there, Mike. And just give you the opportunity to let people know when it's happening, where it's happening, and how they can attend. Because this is what people fundamentally want to know if they're going to turn up.
Okay, it is happening on the 3rd to the 5th of June. So that lovely like Royal Bank Holiday weekend. So
lovely.
Sorry if you've got like celebrations with the Queen planned. I doubt that's your audience demographic though. It's happening at so 3rd to the 5th of June at Hollyfield Farm in Gweek, and you can buy tickets by going to www.kernowtransform.co.uk. or just typing in Kernow Transformed onto social media. It'll all send you to like a ticket link. There's loads of stuff there. Or just drop the page a message if Kernow Transformed Facebook page, Instagram, if you're having trouble with that, but it is pretty easy to find. You can get tickets. We've got a few early bird tickets left, but they're going fast at £20. Other than that, they're £30 tickets, which includes camping. If you want to camp, or if not, you can just drive and come back every day. Just be careful. Don't have too many real ales to get in the car. So don't do that.
There's a lovely pub within staggering distance. I can tell you that, the Black Swan. It's absolutely.
Oh yeah, it's good there, isn't it?
And you can always pop along to the Seal Sanctuary if you fancy a break from the stalls and the politics. It's a lovely little village, Gweek. It's just down the road from me, and I will be there as well for my sins if you want to say hello. So I hope you see an awful lot of people
on the main
there.
Stage, aren't you?
Sorry, what's that?
You're rapping on the main stage for us, aren't you?
Am I? Oh. I'll do anything.
Cornish hip hop, mate. That's what we want.
Except that.
Yeah.
Wonderful to speak to you, John. Thank you so much for organising this event. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. I wish you and everybody else who is coming down and getting involved every success with it. I sincerely hope this is going to be the first of an annual event that's going to become a brilliant thing for Cornwall. And I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to it. And if I don't see you before, I shall see you there.
All right on, mate. Cheers for having me on.
Thanks very much, everybody. Take care.